Hi, I was planning on saying something catchy or fun to start us off today, but I failed. I'm drawing a mental blank here, so let's jump straight in and hope that I'll do much better with the games than I did here. Pew 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 pew, kapow kapow boom! These and more are the sounds of Quake III Arena. Also swish and shoo! Those two. And you better get used to, as this will make more than occasional only appearances. Some say that Quake 3 was the third game in the series, but I disagree. I consider it a sidestep, an offshoot of the main series, made to compete with Unreal Tournament, banking on the online multiplayer arena shooting becoming the next big thing. And as time proved, it was not an incorrect assumption, as arena shooters were, and still are for that matter, extremely popular, even if considerably changed by today. The real third Quake was a fantastic Quake 4, but that's a story for a completely different video. So, Quake 3, what do you think of it? I mean, I don't consider it a bad game, not at all, I had a lot of fun playing it for a little while, but same as Unreal Tournament, I sucked at it. Big time. So whenever there was one or two decent players in the game, I saw the flow more than the action. The tiles are rather clean in most of the stages if you wonder. I have a first-person experience. I mean, sure, Quake could be played locally with bots, and this can be set up in various different ways, even so that I could feel how it is to win in a game like that, but worse fun in playing against them. So I played it online for a little while, and it was a punishing and eye-opening experience, mainly to my shortcomings as a competitive gamer. That said, I'm fine with all that, as I'm all about RPGs and strategies, so I can take comfort with sucking at shooters. Still, Quake 3, competing directly against Unreal Tournament, served in large part a very similar experience. So, it had a pretty cool set of weapons, from melee gauntlet and machine guns as weapons that you start with through pickups of shotgun, plasma gun, light gun, rocket launcher, railgun and the famous BFG. Staples of the series, albeit a bit modified for online shooting. It sported numerous fun, unique and hella playable stages, naturally designed so that they would encourage skirmishes between the players at various predefined hotspots, and game modes most multiplayer shooter fans were very familiar with by 1999, so duel, free-for-all, team deathmatch, capture the flags and the likes. All that made Quake 3 very similar to the aforementioned Unreal Tournament in theory. In practice, whomever played both, and for more than a few games only, will tell you that they feel very distinct from one another, and it would be hard to pick one definitely better out of the two, at least objectively, cause everyone's got their favorites. Anyway, similarities aside, the most prominent feature of Quake 3 was its speed. It was much faster than its earlier entries, and the pace it ran at fitted the multiplayer format very well, making Quake 3 a mainstay of many pro gaming tournaments for years to come. Oh, and also before I forget, Quake 3 introduced rocket jumping. If you played it, you know exactly what I mean. If you didn't, then it was that technique utilized by most good players that required immaculate timing for a rocket shot under one's own legs, just as they were jumping up, which would propel the player upwards many times higher than the regular jump could. It was a game changer. And so was Quake, modernizing the multiplayer arena shooter landscape forever. Heroes of Might and Magic 3, the restoration of Irafia, is everyone's favorite heroes. Yours, that buddies of yours that always smells funny, everyone's. Well, everyone but me, but I'm in a very small, possibly single person minority, so we can ignore me in this particular situation. Anyway, Heroes 3 is rather interestingly set, as it takes place between the mainline Might and Magic games, namely between entries 6 and 7. It comes up with 7 built-in campaigns and numerous single scenarios that can be played against CPU or with others in a very cool hot seat mode. If you ever played any of the earlier games in the series, you won't get lost in Heroes 3. In fact, it's a lot like your favorite pyjama pants. You know, the baggy ones made out of high-quality material with a funny pattern and more comfortable than anything else you have at home. Only not old comfortable like Heroes 2, but new comfortable, so Heroes 3. It builds on the ideas from previous titles, expanding them considerably, but does not re-innovate the wheel. That would be what the ill-fated Heroes 4 did, which was really fun because of how much it shook things up. It didn't land for most gamers though, so the devs quickly reverted to Classic's formula with the 5th entry. It's not something that we'll discuss here today though, so let's jump back to our scheduled gaming nostalgia. Heroes 3 offers traditional for the series 3 planes of gameplay, so overworld map, city view and combat screen. Overworld map is where you easily spend the most of your time, leading your heroes all around Irafia, capturing outposts, mines and towns, finding and picking up treasures, resources and artifacts, and initiating battles with random creatures or enemy heroes. Heroes gain experience in combat, and when they level up, their stats raise and they can pick additional abilities, magical or otherwise, to complement their skill sets. It's worth to make these choices smart, with a particular build in mind, and not haste here as they are permanent and will offer multiple subsequent levels of upgrades throughout the rest of that particular hero's life. The overworld is also now split into above and below ground, and both have similar features, so cities, creatures, mines and the likes. This, while a simple addition, can shake the gameplay rhythm quite considerably, as now you not only can invade the enemy lands on foot or using teleporters, but can also emerge from underneath, same way my boss's demonic wife does when she enters our realm to cause chaos and destruction. I've not noticed her doing anything else really, so I'm convinced that she's an evil creature. Towns and cities are where you erect buildings and hire heroes. These structures can be defensive in their nature, like walls, towers and such, or they can serve bonuses or offer extra features to your chosen out of 8 available in the game factions. There are also upgradable creature dwellings in each city, 7 of them in fact, and they're the base of your soon-to-be unstoppable legions. Combat screens show both armies standing at opposing ends of it and battling it out, one creature stack at a time, alternating between both sides. Heroes stand aside the battle map, and while they don't take an active part in combat themselves, they can cast spells left and right, one per turn even, for as long as they have mana. And these spells can turn the tide of a battle in an instant if utilized smartly. Changes brought in by Heroes of Might and Magic 3 may have not been anything more than iterative, but there's so many of them that when they're put together, it truly deserves to be its own separate entry in the blockbuster series. I agree with the popular sentiment that objectively speaking Heroes 3 is better than 2, because it is, but personally I think its pre-rendered graphics are awful and aged horribly like a dried up raisin, while second game's pixel graphics look like a raisin that was forever preserved in wax, so as good as on day one. Because pixels are visual rot resistant and always look great. Story-wise, after the disappearance of King Roland Iron Fist of Enroth, known among his servants as Featherpalm, as he was lovable, honest and just good, his wife Queen Catherine was the only one left to rule the kingdom. Which was not an issue whatsoever, she's a smart gal and one raised by the famous King Griffonheart of Erathia, so you can be sure that she knows what's what and how to lead big and small nations. But having a kingdom all for herself was the least of her problems. As it turned out, her father was assassinated too, and since the evil dark forces of Nion and Eofor are to blame, Catherine must now journey to Erathia to push them away and restore the kingdom to its former glory. And you're the only one to lead her armies of heroes. If you know the game, you love it already, but if you've never played it before, you'll have a jolly good time discovering all of its mechanics. The Fallen are the former angels that have been cast out from heavens by the god. Don't quote me on that though, I'm not religious and it's all coming from the game's lore. Anyway, they've been kicked out, like a drugged up squatter for misinterpreting God's intentions and claiming that he aimed to destroy humanity for its corruption. Even banished, abandoned and left in the realm of chaos, they still scheme and plan to carry out their mission, aiming for a total human destruction. And the easiest way to do it is by controlling the minds of Earth's leaders, which is precisely what they've done. They've overtaken the biggest nation's leaders along with their military forces, all to set up a singular world government and use it to keep the population oppressed and in submission, like sheep. And I have to say that they succeeded on all fronts. Seeing how things are faring, God decides to intervene, so he picks one of his angels on random, most likely by means of Eeny Meeny Miny Moe, and it's one going by the name of Malachi, and God sends him to Earth to set things right by any means necessary. And trust me when I say it, Malachi takes it to heart, or whatever the angels have in their hairless chests, and the means that he used to bring back order are truly brutally impressive. Requiem Avenging Angel is a first-person shooter set on Earth, mainly in and around the city of New Damascus, and you're naturally in control of Malachi. The enemies that you'll encounter exploring the city are in majority devoted and turned humans, mechanical robots, are there any other kind of robots, and creatures of demonic kind. One particular comes to mind here, but I'm digressing. These are all quite varied and a pleasure to put down. Naturally, as in most shooters, despite being an angel, you have access to a whole plethora of earthly weapons to lay the destruction with. Imagine Kevin Smith's Dogma, but on a much bigger scale. Now, if that was all that there is to say about Requiem, it wouldn't be a special shooter at all, other than having a story a little inspired by the Bible. But as you can probably guess, it's not. The unique feature here are our angel's powers, which for most intents and purposes work kinda like Force does in Jedi Knight games. So you can shoot electricity from your hand like a budget Darth Vader, regenerate health, fly, possess bodies of others, against their will no less, so there's a name for that too, and it starts with R, or even bring back the dead to fight on your side, to name a few. But the most prominent, fun and useful mechanic in the game has got to be the bullet time, which allows you to slow down time to avoid the shots and deliver your deadly attacks at multiple enemies at once. Beautiful explosions of gore-filled graphics paired with satisfying sound design, stellar gameplay and seamlessly designed world that's not divided into separate levels, and story told by numerous in-engine scripted cutscenes make Requiem a pleasure to behold and play. So if you like FPS games, this one should definitely be on top of your to-play list. Descent 3 is a 6 degrees of freedom kind of a vehicular first-person shooter in which you fly your ship in a zero-gravity environment, drowning everything around you in a sea of projectile-delivered destruction. You're a mercenary working for the PTMC, so Post-Terra Mining Corporation, and the game begins literally on the day the second one ended. So with you having barely escaped the destruction of a planetoid on which you were clearing PTMC's robots infected by an alien virus. And when I say clearing, I mean you cleared them out of this existence and you don't play around. Your success rate is at constant and never changing 100%. So, whichever the number of enemies you encounter, that is the exact number of explosions that you leave behind. So yeah, you've succeeded, as you do, and you're on your way to Earth to collect your hard-earned payment. As you jump around the systems, however, speeding home, for dinner, your warp drive breaks down and puts your ship in an uncontrollable drift, which is a little annoying cause space is rather big and all, and that dinner will definitely get cold. The thing is though, that somehow, unluckily, you're drifting straight for the sun. What a bummer. As you begin undressing to withstand aggressively increasing heat and to buy yourself a few extra minutes, praying to the god from our previous game hoping for a miracle, you actually get one. At the very last moment, your ship is rescued by the so-called Red Acropolis research team. Barely alive, hanging to your last breath, you're given another chance and spend a little time recovering on Mars in Red Acropolis' station. When you wake up, they inform you of their discovery of PTMC's conspiracy and evil scheming. First reluctant to believe, you change your mind in a near instant when presented with a proof that it was them who overloaded your warp drive, effectively making you miss dinner. And by days and not hours no less. Red Acropolis gives you a new ship and a mission to stop evil PTMC's executive and his virus that he spreads to gain remote control of all tech within the company and by extension of that, most of the known universe. For the most part, Third Descent's gameplay is identical to that of former two games, taking place mainly in huge labyrinthine corridors of underground facilities with an occasional dip to the surface for some over-the-ground shooting action and sunbathing, not necessarily in that order. Each level completion requires fulfilling of very specific objectives, which can range from activating switches through defeating of enemies all the way to destroying particular objects and anything in between. There's plenty of power-ups scattered around the levels too, and they can abrogate your primary and secondary weapons or countermeasures, which for all intents and purposes are just defensive items like mines, cloaking device or turrets. While Descent 3 is great fun, being graphically lifted extension of the earlier two, it always felt too little too late for me, offering very minuscule upgrades over the original and not feeling innovative enough. Don't let this sourness fool you though, it's a brilliant little shooter, it just could be much better. There was a time when Need for Speed was synonymous with some of the best arcade racers out there, often the best. And 1999's High Stake is no different. And while it is honest to its action-packed breakneck arcade speeds, it dips a little into the realism too. But just a little and not too much, not to scare the loyal followers. So, the damage system, while finally present in the game and influencing cars' performance and looks with bumps and crashes, is not too intrusive, easy to learn and compensate for, and you rarely feel as if it was working against you in particular, because it affects all the cars on the road. Then there are cash prize tournaments, with rewards paid out between the races and spent on repairs, upgrades or new cars. The previously introduced Hot Pursuit mode is still present in High Stakes and expanded with more options, allowing you to play as the police too. The titular High Stakes, however, is a new gameplay mode heavily reliant on risk versus reward racing, and one that can even result with you losing your car along with all of its upgrades, if you bet said car on the race and lose. You know, the whole pink slips thing. Interestingly enough, High Stakes is one of the first and very few games that actually managed to convince the manufacturers to allow it to have a working damage model for the real cars, because historically car manufacturers never did, and often don't do to this very day, like to have their cars being represented as damaged, impaired or not fully functional, which is just stupid on so many levels. But I suppose they have their own reasons, and EA have done the impossible and made them reconsider for this game. High Stakes can be played in split-screen multiplayer too, which is always fun and a feature I feel that most games should have even today, cause while the online gameplay is great, nothing can beat couch multi and players pushing each other off the road as much as they do off the couch. There's over 30 cars in the game if you include police vehicles and 19 unique trucks, 10 entirely new ones and 9 returning from previous entries. All of them can be played in reverse too, and in different weather conditions and the time of the day. As arcade racing titles go, Need for Speed for a long while was the best. 1999's High Stakes is excellent and a lot of fun, especially in its career mode, which can take upwards of 30 hours to complete and is well worth the price the game was selling for. If you enjoy beautiful cars and a sensation of speed, this one delivers more than enough. Check it out. Thief Gold is the updated version of year prior's Thief the Dark Project and a truly fantastic title. It is set in the fantasy medieval setting mixed with industrial steam-based technology, best described as steampunk magic. You're Garrett, once an orphan, picked up from the slum streets and trained to become a thief. Now, years later, a master thief working independently and fending for himself. After all that is retold in detail in the introduction, you're hired to steal an elusive mystical artifact known as the Eye. It's a gem of mythical origins and one that you'll no doubt get, cause you're you and you never fail. As you work on that though, you'll eventually realize that everything's not as straightforward as it seems and that there are much more dangerous and nefarious dark forces at play. Thief Gold is a first-person perspective stealth game, and it's one of those titles that pioneered a new offshoot of the FPS genre, morphing the meaning of that S in the abbreviation from shooter into stealth, with a huge success I must add. And that stealth is your main tool for both traversal and survival. From a tactical point of view of you being a thief and not a warrior, it's best for you to stay in the darkness and work from within it, emerging only when necessary rather than trying to take the enemies head on, as this will nearly always end bad. So you will mostly either avoid the enemies or take them one by one so that they would not be discovered. You've quite a wide selection of gear to deal with all the dangers and environmental puzzles ahead, so there's lockpicks, blackjack, sword, flash bombs, explosive mines, holy water and a bow. There are 5 kinds of special arrows for it, each with a different purpose. Water arrows can be used to douche torches as well as other light sources and clean up bloodstains too. Rope arrows attach climbable rope to wooden surfaces and are crucial on your travels. Moss arrows cover an area with a moss that muffles sounds of footsteps when walked on. Fire arrows can either relight torches or cause considerable damage to the enemies. And finally, noisemaker arrows are just that. They make noise where they hit and attract the enemy's attention to that particular area. The levels are rather open and allow for approaching and completion of objectives in numerous ways, taking different paths and using different strategies. And the higher the difficulty that you pick, the more demanding the tasks, but also more involving and satisfying the experience will be. Thief was a gem among gems when it came out, and a title that turned the whole FPS genre around, proving that it could be as, if not more fun, if the shooting was minimized to the extreme and replaced with a different mechanic. GP500, or more accurately GP500, the official FIM Road Racing World Championship Grand Prix Racing Simulator, is just that, a mouthful. No, let me try again. It's just that. A simulation. It's not one of those games that you jump in and just keep racing, grabbing spots and winning trophies. Nope, none of that. At least initially. If you don't know how to ride a real motorcycle and/or don't have experience with motorbike simulators, you'll most likely jump in and fall off the bike soon after. And then again, and then again, and then again. I think you get the gist. But if you persevere, don't give up and never stop never stopping while being your ultimate best and reaching for your dreams as if there was no tomorrow, you will eventually manage to contain the beast and start racing. I wouldn't expect you to win. No, scratch that. You're you, so obviously you'll win, but I wouldn't expect anyone else to win just like that willy-nilly. They need to gradually learn and get better, slowly working their way onto the respectable spots on the leaderboards. Naturally, I'm exaggerating a little, and while the bike, the track, the physics and most importantly your opponents will all fight you along the way, when you eventually cross that threshold of understanding how to zoom around the circuits, you'll fall in love with GP500. It's not only one of the most realistic races of the time, I'd risk saying that it's one of all times, even to this day. The fact that GP500 looked near lifelike for 1999 only adds to its already undeniable charm. If you're into races and simulations especially, there's a lot to love in GPA 500. If you're not big on them though, it's an easy skip, as there are definitely more suitable games for you in today's video. Expendable is a brilliant 3D action shooter, and not a sequel, but more of an indirect spiritual successor to area popular in comic. It's one of those titles that doesn't ask any philosophical questions, it doesn't pose any problems to solve, and don't even really require you to follow its plot. More often than not, if you're unsure if you're doing the right thing or got lost in the story, just keep pushing forward and shooting anything in your way, and it's more than likely that you're doing the right thing. No reason to slow down either, just be like a plow that leaves bodies and destruction behind, and you'll be all good. The game is set in 2463, a future in which we've colonized and terraformed a considerable chunk of most nearby planets and some of those far off too. With the expansion naturally came the resistance, and one particular race that don't take well to us spreading are the Charva, aggressive and territorial alien species. They've overrun our colonies on the planet Nova Castria and eradicated the entire population there, leaving nothing short of the sea of blood behind. So now we're pissed. Well, not you and I, we're cool, we're easygoing, we're the thinkers after all, and we seek solution and not those responsible. But those in charge sure are. Pissed, that is. So they send you, as our ultimate genetically engineered for murder killing machine, to single-handedly reclaim the planet, leaving no aliens alive. Now, usually in situations like that, we'd send an army, to overwhelm the enemy with our numbers and firepower, but since you're you, we're in a sorta Terminator-like scenario here. Because one of you is much more than most armies, and should be plenty enough to reclaim one average-sized planet over a weekend or two. But if you ever feel like it takes a little too long, you can always call for a buddy to jump in and help you without the Charva from the face of the planet, and preferably from this plane of existence too, in co-op multiplayer. The locations that you'll visit are rather varied and a healthy mix of indoor and outdoor areas, though it has to be noted that they're all largely linear, so getting lost is not an option, unless it's in your own thoughts, pondering the meaning and reasoning behind this never-ending killing spree. Where there's shooting, there's enemies, and those whose bodies you'll see leaving behind you are all pretty interestingly designed. There's a pretty decent number of them and they're fun to dispose of, but they all look suspiciously similar when they're dead. But it is what it is. Weapons are aplenty too, and are all sorts of bigger and smaller sci-fi inspired PPUers. So you use pulse and vulcan cannons, particle accelerators, shotguns, rocket and missile launchers, flamethrowers, mines and napalm grenades. Pretty decent selection if you ask me, and since each enemy is immune to some kind of a damage and vulnerable to others, working it all out is a part of Expendable experience. Graphically, Expendable was a masterpiece on the day of its release, and hardly any other game offered as many fireworks and modern graphical features. So if you're looking for a title out of today's video that can still look rather decent, this is the one. Late 90s were a hella interesting time to be a gamer. They really were. Sid Meier, the legendary designer of Civilization, his buddy Brian Reynolds, responsible for Civilization 2, and Jeff Briggs, a well-known composer and designer, all left Microprose after it was taken over by Spectrum Holbyte and formed their own development studio, Firaxis. Given their shared experience with immersive, deep and addictive 4X games, they wanted to work on something similar. But having no access to Civilization IP, they settled on Civ in space and named it Alpha Centauri. And let me tell you, not many games in the entire history of gaming innovated on its formula as much. On the first glance, Alpha Centauri looked like a purple/pink civilization, but changes under the hood were fundamental. But we'll get to that in a minute, as our trio of game design superheroes made something special out of nothing. Human colony ship UN Unity flying towards the Alpha Centauri suffered sudden and unpredictable reactor malfunction, which caused many of its systems to break down. So the cryopods opened, colonists woke up, and the communication system and contact with Earth was something that was beyond simple means of repair. When the Alpha Centauri was finally reached, the colonists were split into 7 distinctive ideologically groups, and they all landed their respective pods at different parts of the planet, setting up cities and working based off entirely different ideas for its colonization. And this is where the game starts, with you picking a faction, each of which having their own unique advantages and disadvantages, and then landing on the alien-to-you planet's surface. Generally speaking, the main gameplay core of Civilization is sustained in Alpha Centauri, so you'll raise cities or colonies really, you'll research new technologies and manufacture units, you'll explore the land, find and exploit its resources, expand your reach by means of diplomacy, or exterminate the opposing factions if they make a mistake of standing in your way. Other than that, Alpha Centauri pushed the genre forward by a considerable distance, introducing revolutionary and groundbreaking at the time changes. Each of the factions was so distant gameplay-wise from one another that they not only preferred, but straight up required you to approach and play the game in a completely different way, with some of them working better at all, some white, some in peace, some by war, etc. You could terraform squares on the map, effectively changing what they produce and how combat on them would look like in the future. The technology no longer gave you access to new units same way we were used to with Civ games, but rather offered you the ability to use new components in creation of your own custom units. So, all parts that the units are made out of could be picked and matched individually for your combat and peaceful needs and replaced, upgraded or changed, effectively making the possible unique unit count in the game going into millions of possibilities. And yes, I know what I said. So-called social engineering, so modifications to ideological beliefs, allowed you to customize your faction's laws and rule sets, so to speak, and there were even planetary council meetings for all 7 factions to attend, which could decide on many factors influencing the entire planet and how it will progress. And if you think that's all, you're wrong, that's barely scratching the surface. There are secret projects, alien life structures and machines to discover, xenofungus, ancient monoliths and artifacts, and psionic combat, to name a few. Alpha Centauri took what made Civ great and made it bigger, more involving and fun, and ultimately, objectively speaking, better. It just didn't do one thing that would guarantee its mainstay, and instead it relegated Alpha Centauri to a single game and its one expansion pack. What was the mistake, you may wonder? Well, it didn't keep the Earth as the setting and history of mankind as its background. And say what you will, but familiarity of the subject is something that many gamers are drawn to. Alpha Centauri is an amazing game, one worth playing to this very day, and one you should definitely check out if you never had a chance before. Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver is the third in the Legacy of Kain series of action-adventure games. It takes place 1500 years after the events of the first, Blood Omen, and follows the journey of the vampire-turned-wraith Raziel, a lieutenant to the vampire Lord Kain. In the game's backstory, Raziel that you play as is killed by Kain, but then revived by the Elder God to become his Soul Reaver and exact revenge on Kain, in sorta kinda nearly that particular order. Interestingly enough, Soul Reaver is also the name of Kain's sword that you'll get to find during the game. The game is played in third-person full 3D view and features action-packed hack-and-slash combat utilizing combinations of numerous attacks and finishers. Most enemies that you'll face against are vampires, different brutes of which have unique to them special powers, but you'll tackle humans as well, and an occasional wraith here and there in the spectral realm too. Cause yeah, the game allows you to switch between the real and spectral realm on the fly, which can be useful during traversal to pass through locked-off areas and in some environmental puzzling too. Switching back is a completely different thing, but nothing too demanding. Human and spectral enemies can be defeated with Raziel's claws or any of the weapons, but vampires must be weakened first and then impaled, set on fire or tossed into sunlight or water. Defeated enemies leave souls behind that Raziel can use to replenish his health, feeding on his victims' former life essences. Initially you can jump, glide, move blocks and throw objects and enemies, and are unarmed, having only your close and found weapons to fight with, but as the game progresses you learn additional abilities, like phasing through gates, ability to withstand and even swim in water, you'll constrict enemies and objects using astral bands of energy, you'll fire bolts of kinetic energy, set enemies aflame, and more. Soul Reaver is a game that keeps on giving, is what I'm saying, and will introduce new elements to its loop all throughout it, never feeling boring or repetitive. Stellar level design, interesting puzzles and captivating revenge-fueled plot, along with different enemies and ever-growing armament of weapons and skills, makes Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver a game that's not only worth playing, but also entertaining all the way through. So, what do you guys think of 1999 so far? Pretty stellar, right? And I have many more games to cover. One of them is actually 1998's release that I somehow managed to overlook when going through the year, which is very weird as it's one of my most favorite games of all time. But that's something you'll learn in the next episode. For now though, let me know in the comments what you think of today's selection. If you liked the video, hit those like and subscribe buttons below, and maybe share it too, it helps more than you know. If you didn't, then don't naturally. It was fun talking to you as usual, and I'll see you, or more accurately, talk to you very soon.
My tomb and the womb of my rebirth.